This is Mission Control Houston. The year 2013 is kicked off on board the International Space Station with a range of science operations showing just a portion of the kinds of groundbreaking research that are being conducted in low Earth orbit to prepare human beings to explore deep space. Early this week, Monday, Commander Kevin Ford started his day with blood draws, which are a standard procedure to acquire samples for later study. They'll be used in several investigations looking at how life in a microgravity environment affects the biological processes. Ford also worked as the crew medical officer in conjunction with a periodic fitness evaluation for flight engineer Chris Hadfield. Ford did his own daily exercises, which are a standard daily requirement, twice daily requirement for all crew members, that is designed to maintain their physical fitness and prevent bone and muscle atrophy. He also spent the afternoon of his day working on the capillary flow experiment. That's one of the physics research projects, this one looking into how fluids behave in the absence of gravity. Flight engineers Yevgeny Tarelkin and Roman Romanenko worked on the Saner experiment in the Russian module. That's a Russian investigation that's designed to help commercial fishermen find the most productive fishing grounds. Also on Monday, flight engineer Tom Marshburn powered up the ultrasound in order to do some self-scans for the integrated cardiovascular experiment, which is quantifying the atrophy of cardiac muscle and trying to identify the causes of that in order to develop better countermeasures that will be needed for crew members on long-duration flights that go well beyond Earth orbit. All 6 of the Expedition 34 crew members had a day off duty on Tuesday to celebrate the first day of the brand new year, but they got right back to work on Wednesday. For Commander Kevin Ford, he went to work in the Destiny Laboratory setting up the Robonaut 2, and the associated hardware for 2 days of continued evaluations that are designed to help develop new robotic capabilities for space for manipulating mechanisms. The goal here is that the Robonaut tool will help lead to eventual assistance, robotic assistance with tasks and ultimate interaction with the human crew members. Flight engineers Oleg Novitsky and Yevgeny Tarelkin started a 2-day operation replacing a series of panels on the walls inside the Zvezda module. That's a standard maintenance procedure. And they spent their Tuesday afternoon with the BAR experiment. That is testing principles and methods of leak control for a future spacecraft construction. Roman Romanenko had a lot of maintenance work on Tuesday, but also time set aside for crew orientation, along with his Soyuz crewmates, Chris Hadfield and Tom Marshburn. Hadfield and Marshburn each worked with a cognitive assessment investigation that's gathering data on how living in space impacts a person's perception of the environment. They also spent time that day on different projects that are designed to help people on Earth connect with what's going on in space. For Hadfield, it was recording a series of podcasts about life in space. For Marshburn, he conducted a couple of interviews with 2 television stations in his native North Carolina. On Thursday, Hadfield and Marshburn worked together again to set up the MARIS experiment hardware. That acronym stands for Muscle Atrophy Research and Exercise System. That's a European Space Agency project in human research and countermeasures development that's just getting its first tryout on the station right now. Exercise on that MARIS facility is intended to provide researchers with a better understanding of how living in zero-G affects the muscular system, and also to evaluate the efficacy of countermeasures that are in place now to work against the deleterious effects of zero-G. Marshburn also spent part of that day helping Commander Kevin Ford replacing some piping in the waste hygiene compartment. That's the toilet on the U.S. side of the station, which is just one of a number of routine maintenance tasks the crew members have to take care of on a daily and a weekly basis to maintain the station's ability to support them, as well as the science research that they're doing. Hatfield retrieved detectors for an investigation called the Radi-N Bubble Detector Experiment. It's a Canadian experiment that's designed to characterize neutron radiation in the environment. Hadfield also spent time on Thursday partially removing the station's agricultural camera from the Window Observational Research Facility in the Destiny Laboratory. The agricultural camera, known as ISAC, has completed its planned operations. The expectation is that they'll have the crew members inspect that optical quality window next week, and then they'll install a new environmental research and visualization system in its place inside the wharf. The new hardware, the iServe, is an automated system to acquire imagery. It's designed to gain a lot of experience in automated data acquisition, but in the meantime, it will acquire useful imagery for disaster monitoring and environmental decision making. Commander Kevin Ford started his Friday with some refresher training for his role as a crew medical officer and devoted most of the rest of his day, along with help from flight engineer Tom Marshburn, to the setup and execution of the Spheres Zero Robotics experiment. Spheres is an experiment using some experimental free-flying satellites that can be flown using programmed commands. There are teams of students from all around the world who have written algorithms to have the satellites perform specific tasks that are relevant to future space missions. The best of those entries get a chance to have their program executed by the Spheres satellites in a competition on board the space station that takes place on Friday of next week. Friday of this week, Marshburn spent the early part of his day on the integrated cardiovascular experiment, for which he wears some specialized hardware to monitor him while he performs other regular work. The integrated cardiovascular experiment is performed several times over the course of a 6-month mission in order to quantify the extent, the time course, and the clinical significance of the decrease in the size of the heart muscle, which is known to occur in persons who spend a long time in zero-G. Roman Romanenko monitored another round of the Russian plasma crystal experiment, which is looking into the behavior of plasma dust crystals and fluids in microgravity, and saw to some maintenance of the Soyuz vehicle he commands, while flight engineer Yevgeny Tarelkin completed a survey of the windows in the Russian segment of the space station, and Oleg Novitsky continued transfers of materials for disposal into one of the Progress cargo ships before joining Tarelkin for an afternoon working with the bar experiment. In the coming weekend, in the celebration of the Russian Orthodox Christmas on Monday, January 7th, has the expedition crew looking forward to a long weekend. After taking care of some weekly house cleaning and regular daily exercise sessions, the crew members will have time off duty, as well as conferences with their families over the course of the 3 days, with an eye toward getting into the research agenda that awaits them over the remaining 10 weeks of Expedition 34.